Hi everyone, good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining me to Attracting Abundance of Health and Wellbeing, changing your mind and changing your life. So there's a few things that I want to share with you in terms of how we can live an abundant life simply by shifting a couple of things in our life, and that can make the world of a difference. So I'm going to just to give you a brief history of, for those of you who don't know me, so I'm Shed. So I'm a health and wellness coach. So I help individuals improve their health and well-being by using a 12-step process into understanding their beliefs and unleashing their leadership qualities, because I believe that we all have leadership qualities that is just dying to come out, and it wants to sort of be expressed. Because when we are at that stage in life where we start to question what it is that we want, it's our soul expressing itself. It's our spirit sort of wanting to unleash all that it has and all its potential. And sometimes we have it dormant and it's sitting there and it's kind of not moving, and it's like it wants to become unleashed, and you have that power. We all have that power. So we need to start, when we get that that calling or that expression, we need to start questioning about, what are our beliefs? What is exactly stopping us? What is stopping us from moving on and getting the best life that we deserve? So, well, before we do go on, let's have a look and let's have a read about health. Well, what is health? So let's have a look. The definition given by the World Health Organization states that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmities. So what does that exactly mean? So we all know that health is a dynamic condition. So it results from the body's constant adjustments and adaptation in response to changes and stresses within the environment for maintaining an inner equilibrium called homeostasis. So when we are out of balance at any point in our life, something's got to give. And if our stress levels are way too high, and what that does is release hormones called the cortisol level. We move into a fight or flight mode, which then compromises our ability to cognitively function in a positive, healthy way, which is something I'm going to go into in a little bit more detail. So health is something we definitely need to become aware of. A lot of it can be compromised by our environment. So it's the way we adapt to our environment and how we react to the triggers that can alter our state of being. So if we're not careful of any of the external influences, our health and well-being will be compromised. This is why sometimes our immune system is down, we get the cold and flu, we get all kinds of illnesses and diseases, which isn't something very pleasant, which is something we want to prevent. Rightio, so let's move on. So defining health. This is my definition of health. So in order for me to live a healthy, abundant life, I need all of this. I need inspiration. I need joy. I need purpose. I need happiness, love, gratitude, interest, hope. All of these things bundled up gives me the positive health that I need in my life, that's going to give me the abundance and that feeling of living in positive health and well-being. So if I find that any one of those is out of alignment or out of balance, then that I find then my health is then compromised. So before I move on, I want to start talking to you about the mind-body connection, because this is something, when you understand how this works, it makes sense, total sense. And so this isn't something that I'm going to, it's just not a biology lecture. This is just something I thought I'd throw in there, because I find that when I explain this to people, there's a switch that goes on, there's a light bulb moment. So we all know we have trillions of cells in our body. So our cells are the basic building blocks of all living things. So they provide the structure. They use to transport nutrients from food and then converts them into energy. So they also have other specialized functions as well. So when we move up to the next level up from cells, we look at the blood. And the blood, as we know, is made up of many chemical compositions. So the purpose of the blood is to supply oxygen to the cells and then tissue and cells and tissues, and it carries the cells to its appropriate location to perform its function. Then if we look up the next level up, we have the brain. And the brain is a chemist, so it releases chemistry into the blood. But then what chemicals should the brain release into the blood? It's a good question. So the brain is like a control station. So it relays information between our brain and body. So this brain, our brain is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. The function to release chemical reactions into the blood is all based on how we feel. So how does the brain know what type of chemical the brain should release in the blood? And that is then moves on, allows us to move on to the next level. And you guessed it, it's the mind. So it's the mind that determines what type of chemical the brain releases, because the mind is what perceives. It's what we perceive in our environment. It's what we see, what we feel, what we're looking for. And a really good analogy was used by Dr. Krishnamurti, and he was based on, he formed his analogy based on computers to explain the workings of the mind. And he said, the mind is a virtual entity, one that reflects the workings of the neural networks, chemical and hormonal systems in our brain. I love it. It sounds amazing, right? It makes total sense. So basically, in a nutshell, the mind-body connection, it's the mind's interpretation of the world it causes the brain to release chemistry that matches the interpretation to coordinate all of those 50 trillion cells to live in that world. So it's the mind's interpretation. And this might have something to do with the emotions, our perceptions, our beliefs. So these bundled up will give you or control cell function. It's super, super amazing. So let me give you an example. So think of a time when you were in love, okay? When you were in love, something happened to you. What happened? What type of thoughts were running through your mind at the time you were in love? You know, what sort of feelings were you going through? You know, and then just imagine having those feelings, and then your mind feels and senses that love. So feels that love, sees that love, and translate that thought to the brain into chemistry, such as dopamine, which is the pleasure chemical. Then you've got oxytocin, which is the bonding chemical. So there's this mixture of all these happy hormones that are floating through the body, being released into the body. So it's no wonder that when people look at you and they say, gosh, you're glowing. You know, you are literally glowing from inside out. You have all these amazing, beautiful, happy hormones filtering through, and you're literally just glowing, right? So because you have all these beautiful hormones, and I can just keep repeating that because it just sounds so amazing and so beautiful. So as a result, we tend to feel much more happier. We're more connected, content. We feel healthier. We've got more energy. You know, we look and feel great. You know, so these are some of the things that reflect on our body. You know, when our emotions, our perceptions. You know, we believe we're in love, and sure enough, you are. So the opposite goes to someone, or the same thing goes to someone who's someone that experiences the opposite. So someone experiences, let's say fear. So the hormones that gets released by the brain, in this case, would be cortisol. So your body prepares you for flight and fight. So the stress, the cortisol level causes you to close up. So when we are in that flight or fight response, we tend to, be fearful. So if we're fearful, what's happening in that, all of our internal organs are shut off, and the brain is sending, adrenal and all these other hormones into the working muscles to prepare us for fight or flight. So other parts of the body is shut down. And because it's sending priority. So we need to really be mindful that whatever we perceive or whatever we interpret from the around of the world causes our brain to release certain chemicals depending on what it is that we're perceiving. So that and that obviously then is respondent to the environment. So we need to be really careful and mindful that we are not triggering thoughts into our mind that is unpleasant, because often what can happen is that this can create physical symptoms. And so that is something I go into. I could go into another video. I could do that, or I can talk to somebody else, whoever is interested, in a little bit more detail. But it's also something that I work deep with when I'm working with clients on a one-on-one basis. So it goes into a lot of our belief system, which is something I'll go into a little bit later. So basically we need to, in a nutshell, is the brain matches the interpretation to coordinate all of those 50 trillion cells to live in the world, such as your emotions and your beliefs. We got that? Beautiful. But then I want to ask you something. How do we change these emotions and beliefs to experience a heightened sense of well-being and reduce anxiety? Because we do know that when we are in that fear mode, we shut off all of those senses around our environment. That turns into, often we experience anxiety. Right? So that fear turns into anxiety, which then turns into depression. Right? So this is a state that we do not want to go in. Because often when people do go into that state, it's really hard to get out. And so they go through this downward spiral. Rightio, moving on. So let's move on and find out, how do we actually create an abundant health? Well, I put together a 5-step process. But before I go on to that, I want to share with you what Rene Descartes quotes. And he, as you know, is a French philosopher who developed a dualistic theory of the mind and matter. And he says, translates it into today's computer terminology, that explains the mind as software and the brain as hardware. I just love that. It's just beautiful. So moving on now. So how do we create that abundance of health? So I created this 5-step process that I want to share with you. One of the ways we do it is forming a habit. So the formation of a habit creates a conditioning process. So this is what is required when we're starting to make positive change in our lives. So we need to create a habit. It needs to be repetitive. And if you have a look at, say, elite athletes, when they are out doing their thing, doing their skills, the amount of times they need to be able to repetitively do that skill, perform that skill, it's ridiculous. The repetition, constantly repetition, and it's what Tony Robbins says. He says repetition is the mother of all skill. So that's the same thing with, if we want to create change in our life, we need to change the negative habits that are not serving us with a positive habit. You need to replace one habit with a new habit. Okay, so the second step is physiology, and I love this step because physiology is the way we change our bodies. So because emotion, at the end of the day, is emotion. And this is why I'm such a huge advocate for exercise, because movement changes your body on a biochemistry level. So even if you feel that you're not getting anywhere throughout your day, if you just put yourself in a power pose, you find that you're feeling disempowered. If you just put yourself yourself in like a Superman pose, you feel this instant empowerment and you feel like you're back in control. So if any time you feel that way, take a look at be conscious of your posture. Are you slouched over? Are you, have you been sitting for too long? So you need to start to be aware of where your posture is and then start to make and create some changes with that. So physiology, if at any point you feel down, change your posture. It'll change your state. It really will, and in an instant, actually. So the third step is language, of course. So what type of language are you using on a daily basis? Are you using disempowering words such as, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm always sick, I'm not strong enough, I'm not fit enough, I'm too tired? So we need to be mindful of the type of language that we're using to talk to ourselves. This plays a profound impact on our state and our well-being. So we need to remember how our body responds when our mind thinks of various thoughts. So we need to be mindful on the type of thoughts that we allow in our mind. Otherwise, we can manifest certain symptoms to our body, and this is something we want to avoid. The fourth step is focus. So what are we focused on? Are you present with your thoughts, or are you thinking of what happened yesterday or 2 years ago? Is that focus serving you at that point? Probably not. Are we focusing on the problem or the solution? So rather than think of the problem, let's focus on the solution instead. So this will help evolve new thought patterns, new ideas, and thereby create harmony in your mind as opposed to a chaotic mind, which sometimes can get stuck. And the fifth one is curiosity. So I love this step because curiosity will prevent you to judge others. Okay, so rather than be judgmental, let's be curious as to why that person may be acting the way they do. What caused them to be in the state they are? We don't know what the person is going through often, and so when we are being judgmental, we start to judge ourselves. So we need to show curiosity instead. So instead of judgment, so we are more likely to find the good in them and not the bad. So when you start looking for the good in every situation, you are not being so judgmental, and we just simply don't know what that person is going through. That person might have a history of rejection, and their behavior is a way of just showing some form of superiority and maybe a form of defense, for themselves. So their uncertainty with their life will reflect on other people. So we need to come from a place of curiosity. So that will save you a lot of heartache. It certainly will. So moving on to Albert Einstein's quote, and I really, really love this quote, and he says that we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So what does that exactly mean? Well, so many times we're faced with a problem and we spend our energy focusing on the problem and how to solve it, right? So we end up frustrated and we hit a wall. Because we come up short, sometimes we come up short and never seem to come to find a solution. So this can be really, really frustrating. And so Tony Robbins, he says that when we are faced with a problem, we need to change our state and enter into a completely different level of awareness, and so that we're stepping away from the problem at hand and thereby giving ourselves an opportunity to look at it from a totally different perspective. So no matter what, so try to do not focus your energy on the problem itself. So spend a few minutes on that, and spend the rest of your time and energy on positive resolution. So again, you're focusing on the solution rather than the problem. So often things do come up that you cannot control, and I do encourage you not to go there. So if there are things that are out of your control, there's no point worrying about them because they're out of your control. So I would not waste a minute, any minute worrying about those things. A psychologist by the name of Abraham Maslow, he believed that 15 minutes was plenty of time to spend on our problems. So when a client would visit his office, he would allow them to discuss their problems for 15 minutes, and the rest of the time was spent on the solution. So, focusing more on the outcome, the desired outcome. So one really effective strategy for problem solving comes from a psychologist, or it comes from a strategy that a lot of psychologists use, and it teaches their patients how to cope through strategies or processes. And so I'll just bring that slide up. And so it's called the COPE strategy. So the COPE strategy, the C is for challenge, options, plan, and evaluate. I really, really, really love this strategy, because challenge is basically there to help challenge yourself to fully understand your problem. What is the cause of your problem? What do you hope the outcome to be? So these are something that will help you find some form of resolution. So it's really important to find the root of the problem. So where's it actually coming from? So let's work on the cause rather than the symptoms. And when you being clear and honest with yourself, you'll be surprised what you find. And the second one is, moving on, options. So this is a really good one. So I find that I take a pen and paper and I write down a list of all the possible options that I have that can help me solve whatever the problem might be. So this is basically a really good way of brainstorming with yourself. So don't try to weigh the options. All you want to do is just come up with as many as you can and write them down. And then you basically assess the pros and the cons of each option in front of you. The other thing I would do is get a sheet of paper, draw a line in the middle. On one side, I'll have the advantages, and on the other side, I'll have the disadvantages. And then what I'll do is I'll go through each of the options and write down the good or bad of pursuing that route. And I would balance them out, and then basically it'll help you redirect and find possible solutions that will help me with the outcome and ultimately give me the results that I want. So always remember to only focus on the solutions and not those that you can't control. And lastly, evaluate. So when you are in a process of evaluations, you're making or you're solving your problems by asking yourself a couple of questions. And one of them might be is, how has my problem or situation improved? The other might be is, what about my action plan? What about my action plan? Is it helping? Is my action plan keeping me from getting the results I want? Have I given my action plan sufficient time to work? Do I need to revise my action? Do I need to review, cope, and redefine my problem? So these are the sort of questions that you can ask yourself. And by following this process, you learn some really cool skills that can basically help you cope with any type of problem that you may have. So we always need to remember that no problem is bigger than you. If you think back on all the life and all your life experiences and all the trials that you've experienced so far, you made it through. I often that's what I think about. I think about, the difficult tasks that I've had in my past, and I think, well, if I went through that, then I can get through this, and you certainly can. So, when you do come from that type of place, you're thinking from a much more higher plane, and then you start to learn to rise about whatever problem that you're facing. Pretty cool strategy to use. Okay, the other thing I wanted to add there, which I really highly recommend, is gratitude. So I really love this because let me tell you, a study found daily gratitude journal intervention for 21 days resulted in positive mood and energy, feelings of connection to others, which is really important because often we're, as human beings, feeling really disconnected from each other. And the other thing is optimistic ratings of one's life, sleep duration, and sleep quality. And there are many, many other studies that have been published that support that there is a strong association between gratitude and an individual's well-being. Other studies have looked at how gratitude can improve relationships. One study found that individuals who took the time to express gratitude for their partner not only felt more positive toward the other person, but also felt more comfortable expressing concerns about their relationships. So the effect of gratitude on psychology and physical well-being, is something that you cannot take for granted. It's something that is truly, even the evidence and the studies show that there's a really high benefit and a really effective use. So I would recommend having a daily gratitude journal, even if you just put down at least 5 to 10 things that you're grateful for. It will make a huge, huge difference. Okie doke. So key message: for optimal health and well-being, get frequent dose of positive emotions. Yes, 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 yes. So basically, if you are, and I know that we're all after optimal health and well-being, we need to change the way we think. We need to nourish our mind with lots of positive experiences, positive feelings, positive words, positive thoughts, and this is all ultimately going to filter through our brain, and it's going to release all those happy hormones to and throughout the body, and it's going to give you that vitality that you're after, and you're basically preventing yourself from getting yourself out of alignment. So a really, really good way to do this is to always give yourself a dose of positive emotions. Now, side note, I want to just sort of let you know that understand that negative emotions are a normal part of life, and it's crucial for us to experience. So if you think that, that you always have to have a positive, you always have to be in a positive emotion, yeah, you do, but understand also that a negative emotion is also normal. It's also part of the process. But we want to be mindful that we don't want to stay there too long. So the truth is, the trick is accepting and learning to manage those negative or unpleasant emotions. So that is the trick, and that's something I teach, and that there is a strategy involved with that, and that's once you learn it, you've got the skill for life. I thought I'd also throw in there some values. And so values, I look at values as your superpowers. So it's the thing that you stand for. So values determine how you will respond to any given experience in your life. So they're like the executive level of judgment in your brain. So most of these levels have been programmed through either punishment or by reward. So but the challenge for most people is that most of these values are unconscious. Okay, so what you choose to depend on what you place your highest value at the time. So what type of values do you hold in high regard? Is it passion? Is it kindness? Is it honesty? Is it love? Is it authenticity? Is it peace? So get a gist of what values you hold close to you, and ask yourself, what's most important to you about relationships? What's most important to you about your job? So to get an understanding of what your values are is by asking yourself that question. What's most important to you about your relationships? Whether that would be your relationship with your husband, whether it may be with your work colleagues. These are some of the things that, could give you a clue as to what you value the most. And this will basically determine how you respond to the experiences you get in your life. So this is something I work more closely and more in depth with during my workshops. and also on a one-on-one basis as well. But at least it gives you some form of idea as to how that relates and interrelates into your life. So there is so let's go through a summary before I go on any further. So what we spoke about is health and how dynamic it is. Took you through an understanding of the mind-body connection. We've applied a very 5-step easy process of creating an abundance of health. So they are habits, getting into changing one negative habit with a positive habit, and then changing our physiology, so being mindful of moving our body every now and then on a regular basis. Our language, we need to be careful of the type of words that we're thinking and saying to ourselves. We need to look at what we're focusing on, and we also need to be curious. So if we're curious, we're taking away the power. So what am I trying to say with that? So if we're curious, rather than be judgmental, at least this way we're starting to question, what drove me to that type of behavior? We start to ask ourselves, let's be curious. Or what made them act the way they did? What is that person going through? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? That is that 5-step process of creating abundance of health. And then we spoke about the COPE strategy, which is really simple strategy to use. We spoke about gratitude, and then lastly, we looked at what our values are. So this is just a summary, it's a basic explanation of how we can start making positive changes towards our health and well-being by just paying attention to those simple strategies that we can use today, and it will make a huge difference. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me or call me, and I'll be more than happy to discuss any questions that you may have. If there's anything you need more clarification on, please feel free to be in touch and get in contact. I would love to hear from you. If you have any feedback, please provide them. I'd be more than happy to hear your contributions. So again, I want to thank you very much for joining me and taking the time to listen to this short video that I've created for you. Thank you again.